Most lifters think that the hack squat is one of the best leg exercises you can do. I strongly disagree. In fact, after 40, it might be one of the worst exercises for your knees. Today, I'm going to break down why the hack squat myth needs to die and what a smarter alternative looks like. This is HitX. Let's go.
Watch your form.
Alright, let's clear something up about the hack squat, because this exercise has been surrounded by bodybuilding folklore for decades. You often hear people say the hack squat builds the teardrop of the quadriceps, the vastus medialis. That somehow this machine uniquely targets that area, but that idea has no real physiological basis. The quadriceps function as a single integrated muscle group. You don't selectively carve out one head of the quad simply by changing the machine or the angle of the sled. Muscle fibers don't suddenly decide to work differently because a bodybuilding magazine said so. When you actually examine the biomechanics, the hack squat often places the knee joint under very high stress, especially in the bottom portion of the movement where the knees travel far forward while the load is locked into a fixed track. That setup creates very high compressive forces on the knee joint without providing any unique muscular advantage compared to the other leg movements. So the supposed teardrop activation people talk about is really just gym mythology. You're not building some special section of the quadriceps. What you're often doing instead is placing more stress on the knee joint than necessary, and especially after 40 when connective tissues recover more slowly. That's simply not a smart trade. In high-intensity training, the goal is simple: maximum muscular stimulation with minimum joint stress. Muscle growth comes from stimulating the muscle, not from abusing the joint. If an exercise beats up your knees more than it builds your legs, it's not hardcore, it's just bad training. Alright, so now let's move from the hack squat to the free weight squat. This is the exercise many people consider the king of all leg training exercises. And yes, in some ways it's a little better than the hack squat. But that doesn't automatically make it a great exercise. Because the moment you place a loaded barbell across your shoulders, you're going to do something that has nothing to do with leg development: massive spinal compression. When you squat with heavy weight, the spine is being directly loaded from top to bottom. Research on spinal loading during barbell squats shows compressive forces on the spine that can reach several times your body weight. That is a tremendous amount of pressure moving to the vertebrae and the intervertebral discs. And here's the key point: that spinal loading does nothing to improve the stimulus to the quadriceps. Your legs don't grow better simply because your spine is carrying more weight. All you're doing is adding orthopedic stress to an area of the body that has nothing to do with the muscle you're trying to develop. And there's the other issue: safety. A true high-intensity set requires training very close to muscular failure. By performing a barbell squat to failure is one of the most dangerous situations you can create in a gym, even if you have a spotter. If the lift breaks down, the consequences can be serious. That's exactly why I've never accepted the idea that squats are somehow mandatory for building great legs. That's not a piece of bodybuilding folklore that has been repeated for decades. You don't need squats to build powerful quadriceps. What you need is an exercise that delivers maximum tension to the legs with minimum stress on the joints and spine. And there is a movement that does that far better. In fact, if you're going to perform a squat pattern at all, there's one version that makes far more sense. And that is what we are going to look at next. So if putting a heavy barbell on your back isn't really the smartest way to squat, what is? For me, the answer is simple: the belt squat. And the reason this exercise works so well comes down to one big difference in how the load is applied. With a barbell squat, all that weight is sitting on your shoulders. Your spine is compressed, your lower back has to stabilize the entire load, and very often the lower back becomes the weakling before the legs are actually pushed to the limit. With the belt squat, the resistance is attached directly to your hips. So now the load goes exactly where it belongs, into the legs. Your quads, your glutes, your entire lower body without crushing the spine or forcing the lower back to do a job it was never meant to do. Look at the movement here. Your torso stays upright, your spine stays neutral, and the hips and knees move naturally through the exercise. But there's another major advantage here, especially if you train the high intensity way. In high intensity training, the goal is to take a set all the way to momentary muscular failure. That's where the real growth stimulus happens. The problem with many squat variations is the psychological barrier. When you have a heavy barbell in your back, part of the mind is always thinking about getting stuck under the weight. That fear alone can limit how hard you're willing to push. The belt squat removes that completely. There's no bar on your back, no risk of getting buried under weight, which means you can drive the legs all the way to failure and focus 100% on pushing the muscle as hard as possible. And that's exactly why this exercise fits so well within high intensity training. Maximum tension in the legs, minimum unnecessary stress on the spine. And the ability to truly push the set to failure without hesitation. For me, that makes the belt squat one of the smartest and most effective squat variations you can use, especially if you're serious about building legs and protecting your body at the same time.
So there you have it. 2 exercises that look hardcore, but come with a terrible risk to reward ratio once you're past 40. Smart training isn't about tradition. It's about stimulus without destroying your joints. And that is exactly what high intensity training is about. You want to learn how to train properly after 40 using the principles of high intensity training, the right exercise, the right volume, the right recovery, check out my book, Stronger 40. It walks you step by step through how to build muscle, stay strong, and keep your joints healthy as you get older. You can find it at hitmanuals.com. If you want more rational training breakdowns like this, make sure to subscribe. This is HitX, where reason meets intensity.